Hey, it's Brandi Kruse. You're watching a clip from our weekly show, Sundays with Subscribers. To get access to full episodes and more, become a subscriber to the show by visiting undividedpod.com. Dr. Raul Garcia, welcome to Undivided.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
I have known for a long time, I think it wasn't a well-kept secret that you were going to probably run again. Were you trying to keep it a secret? Because if you were, it didn't work very well.
Right. No, what I wanted to do was educate myself on the real issues of the state. So I always talk of myself in the last time that I ran as this idealistic kid that thought that he was going to win in 10 weeks a state election, and realized really fast that that doesn't happen. And so the next 3 years, what I did was try and dive into the issues of the state, go around the state, learn about the state, and see if indeed that was the decision that I should make to run again for governor. So I was going around the state, listening, learning, and educating individuals.
So let's talk about the 2020 campaign because, as you said, I think you filed on the deadline day or just the day before.
Right.
So super late. And it seemed like it was this sort of Hail Mary from the mainstream Republicans to try to do something about Loren Culp. Is that what was happening behind the scenes?
No, I have answered this question actually a couple of times.
Answer it again for our viewers.
This happened at a campfire at Rimrock. My wife and I were sitting down and I was complaining about the status quo of our state. And she turned to me and said, "You know, I'm tired of this. Why don't you run for governor?" And it was the first time in her life that she said something that would support me being in public office. I worked for Senator Dole, so I always had this dream of one day giving back to the country that gave me so much in public office, but she had never verbalized that. And she said, "You should run for governor." And I said, "You would support that?" And she said, "I double dog dare you." And she was tired of hearing myself and my mother talk about communist Cuba and how a one-party system didn't work and how this was getting there and we could see it coming and that the future was bleak and so on and so forth. So from there grew my desire to run. I basically didn't know anything. I had to learn it very fast. I signed up to run. I met a couple of people, and then I met Sam Reed, and he heard me and saw why I wanted to run, and he said, "You know, I could get behind that. We don't have a candidate that we support, so why not you?" And that's how that relationship started, not the other way around.
Okay.
I didn't know Sam Reed before I ever decided to run for governor.
So you weren't recruited by moderate Republicans to be like, "Hey, Loren Culp, he's going to tank. We need you to step up." It was your wife and then the support came
Yeah, it was
after.
my wife and then, a few friends from Yakima to the west side, and then it just started happening. And you get caught up in this snowball that gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I never expected that to happen, and it did. So it was probably the best thing that my wife and I ever did, because she wasn't interested in politics before 2020. And now she is directly involved in it and very interested to be involved. So I'm very pleased that happened.
Yeah, it was if we take out the timing aspect of it, right? That you did not run a very long campaign,
Right.
very last minute. I think people would look at the results and be like, okay, here's a Republican who got, I think, fourth amongst the Republican field. So like lost to Loren Culp in the primary, lost to Josh Freed in the primary, lost to Tim Eyman in the primary. And so they might look at that and think, well, that doesn't bode well for his ability to beat someone like Bob Ferguson. What would you say to them?
Well, back in 2020, if you saw our progress, right at that primary was when our upswing on the slope was coming to our campaign. We had a lot of momentum, and we were able to raise $420,000 in 10 weeks. Mm-hmm. And we were able to attain 150,000 votes in those 10 weeks. So it was an everyday thing. I remember back then. Why now? As I said, looking back at this idealistic kid that thought that he was going to win an election in 10 weeks, and getting serious about the political process in the state of Washington and what Washington needs. I think that for a very long time, we have ran candidates that only represent the ideology of their party.
Okay.
And when we do that, the minority party is always going to lose. If we were to have a candidate that has the intention of representing everyone in the state of Washington, then that candidate will have a better chance of being successful and actually governing successfully. And fundamentally, for me, a governor should be someone that wants to represent the whole state, not only one party's ideology. As a matter of fact, I believe that when you have different ideologies at the table, you usually come out with a better outcome. And this is the problem with our one-party system that we have today. If you have a one-party system, you double down in what you know, and you become more and more and more extreme.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think the one-party system has been incredibly destructive. But, there's a question of whether voters are ready to vote for something different. And even though, we talk, I think every governor runs and says, I want to be a governor for everyone. Like, that's not an uncommon thing. I'm pretty sure Jay Inslee has said it. He's shown that he wasn't a governor for everyone. I don't even know if he remembers that he came from the east side of the Cascades. So I guess you'll have people who hear that and think, well, yeah, the last guy said that too. So how do you prove that you're going to be a governor for everyone? Because you are running as a Republican.
Well, we want to run to find solutions to the problems that we have in our state, right? So we concentrate on issues instead of the usual political divide. Let's concentrate on the issues that really matter to the people of Washington and find solution to those. And if we do that, I think we'll be successful.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear what some of your hallmark issues are going to be that you really think are going to be effective in reaching voters. I got to be frank, though, the name recognition thing is tough. It's not there for you right now. And I don't know if you can buy it. I know that campaigns are very good at this stuff. They can look at how much will it cost to get Dr. Raul Garcia enough name recognition on the west side of the state. Have you guys assessed that and figured out, what it's going to cost to get your name to be essentially a household name by 2024?
Well, if we look at the past, right, Rob McKenna raised $14 million. And he was the closest to winning the election that we had in the near past. So we believe that we have to be around that figure, and that we have to concentrate our campaign heavily on fundraising and making sure that our message of issues comes out. I don't know about you, but I am tired of living in a divided world.
Yeah.
And I think that my opponents, that is what they're going to represent. They're going to represent, again, a divided world. And I think that people out there are also tired, and they want to come together. The Surgeon General just came out and said that we have a big pandemic after the pandemic. And that pandemic is loneliness. People are disconnected. They're not belonging to anything. Well, if we form a campaign that truly is inclusive of everyone and wants to bring these people to feel that they are wanted in the community, to bring these people that are lonely to be in city activities and belong to clubs again and be a part of a neighborhood, be a part of a community, I think that campaign will grow.
Yeah, so what does that look like? Because, like I said, name recognition, it just is a thing. It's just a thing you have to contend with, not only as a Republican from the other side of the Cascades. You mentioned Rob McKenna. He was Attorney General, and so there was some inherent name recognition where his name had been on the ballot before. So how do you, what does that look like from a campaign perspective and what you just talked about, trying to spread the message that you've laid out of unity and bringing communities together? What is your campaign strategy for the west side of the Cascades?
Well, I'll give you a perspective that I know in history. When Florida was a completely Republican state, Janet Reno was running for Attorney General.
Well, you're going on the way back machine. Okay, go ahead.
Yes, we're dating ourselves. But anyway, she knocked on 400,000 doors, right? And she won as a Democrat in a Republican state. So I intend to work really hard. I spoke with Larry Hogan, who didn't really have name recognition when he ran for governor of Maryland. And he said to me, Raul, I went everywhere. I went to birthday parties. I talked to people on the side of the road. I went everywhere, and this is what I intend to do. I intend to, hopefully, the day before election, sit down as President Obama did. I remember watching him on TV, and he said, I did everything I could. Mm-hmm. Now it's up to you. And I want to end up there. So I will work harder than I have ever worked in my life to be able to change the life of 7.8 million people, because it's worth it.
Well, I'm glad to hear you bring up just knocking on doors and like good old-fashioned hard work, because I think there are too many political candidates now who think that they can win elections on social media. I think Lauren Culp was an example of that. I think that it was this echo chamber of like maybe 1,000 people who were super excited about him, and it was all over social media, and they convinced themselves that he could win, and he went down in flaming fashion. So I'm glad to hear you say that you're like, yeah, I'm going to go meet people. I'm going to go knock on doors. We'll get back to kind of some of the Republican issues with the electorate in Washington State and kind of where the party is right now with that name label. But talk about what the key issues, when you do go knock on those doors, what you're going to be talking to people about.
Well, I think, as I said in my speech, in my profession, whoever came in the door in the last 25 years as an emergency physician, I treated, right? So I don't care who you are or where you come from, I'm going to treat you. And that translated to our family, right? Our family is very accepting. But we cannot be accepting to the point that we are accepting things that are detrimental to our daily lives and the lives of the families in Washington State. For example, we can't be accepting of criminality. We have to draw a line and say, no, that's not okay. We can't be accepting of people dying in the street of mental health and drug addiction. We have to find solutions to that and actually do it with actions. We can't be accepting of women and children being homeless. That's not a partisan thing. Everyone could agree that we need to find a solution to that, because those are the first victims of predators that are already out there, right? We cannot be accepting that our children's education outcomes are declining. We have to draw a line and say, no, what is the solution to that? So I would say that, to play on words, because I'm a physician, that we're running to bring health back into an unhealthy state.
Yeah.
And we are unhealthy. We have safety is a big issue all around the state. The last 2 years, when I spoke with people in Spokane or in Yakima or in Walla Walla or in King County or in Pierce County, they said, we want safety. Business owners want safety for their business, not only individual families. So that's a big deal that we need to resolve. And I would say that the homeless issue has been around for so long that is almost now an intractable problem. Well, let's attack it. And what my vision of it is a triple play of mental health, drug addiction, and housing. We have to do all three. We can't just give a house to someone that has a mental health problem like schizophrenia, because he's going to leave. We can't just give a house to someone that has a drug addiction problem, because not only is now that house going to be a drug house, but it's going to affect everybody that lives around them. So we need to attack it in all three ways. We need to have precise and effective solutions to do that. I think that our kids' education is vital to many people in our state. There is a large amount of parents that are taking away our kids from public school and homeschooling them or putting them in private school
Yeah.
because of our education system. We have to make sure that our values come back to bring partnerships between parents and teachers. There is lately a movement to eliminate parents from the picture. The state knows better. I mean, we could talk about the law that just passed. The state knows better than parents. And I could tell you that.
We'll talk about it. Yes.
Yes. I mean, I have a 15-year-old, and if the state calls me that she's somewhere and they're not telling me where she is, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to form partnerships for the purpose of improving our education. And I could go on. I want to make sure that small businesses succeed again. 40% of small business died during COVID, and it was like nobody cared, right? Certainly our government didn't care. So I have gone around and said, okay, we could do this, we could do that, but I am going to continue to go around the state for the rest of this year. I'm not going to sit here and say that I have all the solutions right now, but I want to continue to listen and learn from experts, from our citizens, from elected officials. And in 2024, when we continue our campaign, bring out proposals for each of these things that we feel are very effective. But I want to bounce this off of experts that are in the field, from the environment to safety. And I think that we will be successful if we include everybody in giving input to that solution.
Yeah, I can appreciate the idea behind that. I don't know that the media is going to let you off the hook if you say I don't have a solution for that yet, but I'll tell you in a year.
No. I will tell you what
right.
my solutions are now. What my vision is.
Yeah.
Is the how to get it done that I want to solidify before I put a proposal out. I want to make sure that I do this scientifically, right? I mean, if I'm bringing my experience as a physician of 25 years, I am going to continue that mindset of being a scientist,
Yeah.
right? You bring me statistics that works, and that is the idea that we're going to follow. And if we do that, I think we're going to be successful as a government, Brandi.
Let's talk about some things in practice, because I think that, so we've had a trifecta in Washington State for 7 or 8 legislative sessions, one of the two. And I want to try to help people understand what a little bit of divided government could do for them, right? Whether it's the governor's office or we get like the Senate back or something like that. So if you were the governor, you're familiar with, the laws that were signed into. In fact, you were showing me you got a Jay Inslee pen because he signed. We'll talk about the bill he signed that you helped with. This legislative session, had you been the governor, are there any bills you would have put your veto pen on?
Well, what I'm concerned about is that our state officials, the governor, our chief legal officer, remain completely silent on this Blake problem, on this drug problem that we have in our state. And that's really important to me because I see people dying of fentanyl every day, not just a regular guy that dies of fentanyl. No, these are children that don't even know how to make decisions yet, that are adult decisions, and they get hooked on this fentanyl and die.
There was a 1-year-old baby that just died up in Snohomish County a couple days ago.
This is a problem that all of us, you and I, everybody, Nicole, everybody needs to join together and say, we're going to treat this seriously. We're going to focus on this because this problem is going to kill a lot of people. It's already killed more people in Seattle than COVID, right? So I'm just curious how our executive branch remains silent and not push legislation to resolve this.
Well, Inslee spoke up the last day of the legislative session, or maybe even just the day before. Now he's saying that he's been working behind the scenes. So if you had been the governor, I want people to understand what would have been different if you were in the governor's office during some of these decisions. If you had been the governor this legislative session, working with a Democratic-controlled Senate and House, how would you have worked with them to try to get a bill that was actually meaningful?
Well, one of the things that I have very sharp in my mind about Ronald Reagan is that he was the last president to win 49 states, right? And he did it with a blueprint of saying just because we only agree 80% of the time doesn't mean you're 20% my enemy. And this legislative session, you said it, I went to Olympia and I worked hard on improving health care. And I sat with Democrats and Republicans, and I enjoyed it. It was a conversation about the 80% of the things that we agree on. And I think that we could resolve so much on that 80%. So I would have sat down with the legislative leaders and say, this is a problem in our state. Let's work together so we can have a solution as soon as possible. Every day, people are dying of this in our streets. This is not compassion. It's not a compassionate government to let people die in our streets every day and not have the intention of finding a solution right away. Yeah. Right? So that would be a very different thing that happened this last 4 months, where we heard crickets from the governor's office until the last day. This is a really important issue. And fine, they're going to come back next week and be on call for 30 days until they find something. And I hope that something is something really fruitful that will benefit our families.
Yeah, how do you deal with, because, I like a good bipartisanship. I love building consensus. You have a segment of the Democratic Party in Olympia that wants to decriminalize drugs. And that's how we wound up in this situation, is they kept watering down good Blake fixes until they were absolutely meaningless. So how would you work with progressives who not only support some of those really detrimental policy prescriptions, but have a pretty big influence on what their party allows through?
So I would sit with them and say, okay, let's talk. We need a solution, right? People are dying. That we can agree on. People are dying in our streets. We need a solution. Also, we could agree on that we want to get these individuals out of that vicious circle that they're in, right? This is compassionate government. We want to make sure that we get rid of drug addiction in our streets. So these people are contributing members of society. And I think that everybody can agree on that, okay? We get to that point. So who is responsible for this being in the street? The dealers? Okay, I need you to be with me on this, that the dealers need harsh punishment. These are the first people that we take out of the streets.
Yeah.
Harsh punishment on that. And now let's come to a balance of punitive versus compassion on the people that possess. We need to bring these people out of the street. So fine, we're going to give them a program. We're going to have a program for them to get out of the drug addiction. But that program has to be with teeth. If we don't have teeth on it, it'll be like King County, right? Oh, I'll go to rehab, and then they never show up. We can't have that. And do it in a ladder effect. If it's your first offense, this is what we're going to do. If you're a multiple offender, your penalty is going to be higher, and you need to get out of the street. And I think that conversation could amount to a solution.
Do you think the threat of having a governor who will veto some of their worst impulses would force them or compel them to send you a better bill?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the power of having the governor's office be on the other side. Having the threat of, no, you have to work with me. Because if you don't, all these bills that you have are not going to go anywhere. I think that's a big power.
Back to my question about this legislative session, what would you have vetoed? Senate Bill 5599, which we can discuss. People on this show will be familiar with what that is. I consider it government-sanctioned kidnapping of children. Would you have vetoed it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Without question.
Well, then I can tell you what would have happened. You would have been called a transphobe. Can you deal with that?
Yes, I can deal with that because I have been very open about how I feel about that subject. I think that if we are going to be an accepting society of any individual and a compassionate society, we have to understand that these individuals that go from one sex to the other don't live a happily ever after life. They go through a lot of obstacles mentally and physically to get to where they want to be. And even then, John Hopkins statistics show that they remain at a point where they need mental and physical help to continue to be in that situation. So let's say we're an accepting society and that we are compassionate. We need to understand that. And that's where I stand, right? You want to do a certain thing. We are going to help you do that. And we understand that you're going to go through a tough period. We're here to support you, and that's how I feel about it. So no, I am not a transphobe. I just don't feel that with the developmental milestones of children, you can have a child say that they're estranged from their parents. What does that mean? Right?
They ran away. By their own choosing.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, my daughter is somewhere and the state doesn't want to tell me where she is. We have a problem here, right? Let's try to resolve issues with coming to the table instead of pitchforks and this is the way it is. And I say that to both parties, right? I came from a time where I worked for Senator Dole. We used to play softball with the Democrats. We used to have dinner with the Democrats. We used to hang out together all the time. And we resolved issues together that were more beneficial than if one party would have said, no, this is the way it is. So that's my vision, my goal.
Would you have banned, or would you have vetoed the ban on semi-automatic rifles?
Would I have vetoed the ban?
The assault weapon ban. Would you have vetoed it?
Yes, I would have vetoed it. It is obviously the Second Amendment right of individuals in the United States to have arms, and I came from a country that, because they took the arms away, there was a dictator for 63, 64 years now. And the people suffered, right? When Hitler came into power as chancellor, that's the first thing he did. He took away the arms so the people wouldn't be able to rebel. And the reason for the Second Amendment is exactly that. We don't have the Second Amendment for going to hunt. We have the Second Amendment to make sure that if we have a government that we don't agree with, we are able to defend ourselves. Now, this is a big issue, right? Yeah. With many parts.
And it will be for Bob Ferguson. That's going to be one of his key things that he's going to celebrate that he's done.
Oh, no, I know. He was an author on this, and I'm pretty confident that the NRA will win the lawsuit in the Supreme Court. Having said that, I want to say something very important to everyone out there. We have school shootings. That shouldn't happen, right? I, as a parent, want to make sure that my children are safe at school. So we need a solution to make sure that that doesn't happen. And I hear that gun Guns don't kill people. People do. I hear that. I agree. But we have to make sure that guns are in the hands of the people that it should be. And the first thing we have to do is be very swift and hard on gun violence and gun crime. People that steal guns or that should not have a gun, those need to be swiftly punished, and that situation needs to be erased. And then we have to make sure that the people that have weapons don't have mental issues, right? You look at all the shootings that we've had, a lot of them, the majority, if not all. I mean, if you are shooting a gun against many people, you have mental issues.
Yeah.
Right? So where do we drop the ball? And what do we do about it? Right? So I am open to that. I am open to that because we need to find a solution for our children. And I think that anybody that has children in the state of Washington will say the same. Well, I want my children to be safe at school.
So you're talking red flag laws.
Well, let's go to the table, right? And let's put everything in. And like I said, I'm going to be a scientist. And you got to bring me statistics that say that really will change the status quo. And if it really does, then we will go with that idea. But I'm also careful because of my background, right? I don't want to take any step that takes any liberty away that I want to protect so much. So it's a fine balance, and we have to find a solution. It's like the Apollo when it was out in space, and everybody gathered down here and said, hey, this is all they have up there, and we need to bring them back.
Yeah.
Don't tell me no. This is what they have. We need to bring them back. Let's do it. And that's how we need to run our government. We need a solution for this. We're the experts. Let's find a solution. Don't tell me no. Let's find a solution.
Taxation has been a big topic. Jay Inslee ran many, many moons again on the promise that he'd never raise taxes, and we all know how that went. My last kind of veto question, would you have vetoed the capital gains tax?
Oh, of course.
Why?
Because it's an income tax, right?
Good, quick answer. Yes. Well, not according to the state Supreme Court, it's not.
Well, I sometimes don't know how Gonzalez sleeps at night, but I think it's a very political Supreme Court, and I like to think that, idealistically, Supreme Court judges feel that they're impartial and that they should. But it's obvious that is a very skewed Supreme Court, and it's very political, and I feel sorry for that. So yes, no, capital gains is an income tax, and we are not supposed to have income tax in this state.
Yeah. At the same time, do you think that our tax system is upside down? That's said a lot by Democrats, that it burdens the poor at a greater rate than it burdens the wealthy.
Well, I would say that, let's take the gas tax. Mm-hmm. Yes, it burdens the poor. It burdens the farmer, the farm worker that gets up every morning and has to pay that gas tax to go to work. Richer people, it doesn't hurt them as much, right? So I would agree with that when it comes to that example. I think that we need the government to open opportunities, not make our life harder, right? For example, small business. I would like to see an initiative in the state of Washington, or have it be done, that a small business doesn't pay taxes unless they make a certain amount of money, right? We do that on our income tax. If we are poor, we don't pay as many taxes as the richer people. But when we transfer that into the business world, we're supposed to be automatically rich.
Yeah.
So mom and pop can't get off the ground on a small business because they have to pay taxes from day one. So I'd like to see a break. Start your business. We're going to help you. And when you get to this much, you're going to start paying taxes. But do it. Let's feed our community.
Yeah. And to me, I think it's undeniable that the tax system does burden the poor more. I mean, you look at the sales tax and the gas tax, and that's just a fact. It doesn't mean I want an income tax, but I think that one of the messaging things that Republicans have kind of failed on that I've seen Republican candidates is, Democrats passed the capital gains tax. And what did they say it was for? Tax the rich, right? But they didn't alleviate the burden of taxes on the poor. They just taxed the rich more. So how do you, when you go out and message on this issue on taxes, how would you propose, when you gave the example right there of like tax cuts for businesses, but how would you propose we do help the poor without an income tax, without switching everything over to an income tax? Is there a way to alleviate the tax burden on the poor?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me something that I didn't know the answer to at this moment, but that's who you are. Let me think on that.
Yeah.
I think it should be our objective, right? I think it should be our objective. And I will bring back an answer to you.
I like it.
I will bring back an answer to you.
Because taxing the rich isn't an answer unless those taxes are offsetting taxes that the poor pay. And so I think it's silly that Democrats are like, we're taxing the rich to help the poor. It's like, no, you're not.
And that's exactly, I wanted to talk to that.
Yeah.
That is ambition of getting more money into the government.
Right.
Right. I heard a Harvard, I think it was a Harvard professor that came to the State of Downtown address, and him being a liberal, said to the Liberal Council of Seattle, please stop taxing businesses. This is not your cash machine. They're going to leave.
Yeah.
They're going to leave. And we have to stop this mentality that we need to live off the backs of the people of the state. Let's find other innovative solutions for that, for income. There are states that don't have taxes. There are countries that actually don't have income tax.
There are states that have no taxes?
No. For example, Oregon doesn't have a sales tax.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Some taxes.
Yeah.
I was like, point me to the state that has no taxes.
Alaska, right?
Yeah.
So, there are countries that live off tourism and don't tax their citizens. So this is something that we could sit around and brainstorm and say, okay, we need to find a tax break for the poor. How do we do that? Because the sales tax affects them more than anybody else, right? The gas tax affects them more than anybody else. How can we find a solution? So I'm going to work on that.
As much as Republicans are opposed to an income tax, right? I get it. I don't want to pay an income tax either. Wouldn't it be simpler? Oh, I'm going to really tick people off. Wouldn't it be simpler?
You're already paying a tax in King County.
Listen, I'm not running for anything, so I can say this. Wouldn't it be easier to get rid of the gas tax, the sales tax, and do an income tax? As long as the net that you're taking from the working class doesn't change, like there's still, let's say their income tax is 3%, and it's about the same that they would pay between the sales tax and the gas tax. I guess why are Republicans so opposed to that idea?
So your idea is good. However, let me give you a friendly amendment.
Okay, amend it. Amend away.
Okay. So if you did that, and I am not by any means supporting an income tax in the state of Washington ever. But let's hypothetically say we get rid of the gas tax, we get rid of the sales tax, and we do income tax, right? Then it should be a flat tax of your gross income.
And that's all that would be constitutional, is a flat tax.
Of your gross income. And that way, yes, it would benefit the poor people, right? So if it's gross and you can't have deductions, and you pay that flat tax, then basically this is your fee to live in Washington, right? Again, I am not in support of any Washington state income tax. This is a hypothetical. If we get rid of the gas tax and if we get rid of the sales tax, how can we help the poor? So I am going to work on this, okay?
If I were a dishonest journalist, I could really edit that into something extra special. The other big issue, I am sure that you and your team have spent many a day and night messaging on this issue. Abortion is just going to be a problem.
Okay.
What is your personal, not political, what is your personal position on abortion?
Okay. I could give you the whole gamut. My personal belief, and this is scientifically, let's take religion out.
Sure.
Let's take the visceral feelings out, because it's a very visceral issue. Life starts at conception, whether you call it a cell or a zygote or a baby. There is a life there. For that reason, me personally, I have never performed an abortion as a physician. I never will. I won't ask my wife for an abortion. That is my position on abortion myself.
Okay. As a politician, it is an issue that scares, I think, not just Democratic voters, but also, frankly, independent women like myself.
Right.
If you were the governor, would you make any effort to change our current laws around abortion?
So in the state of Washington, the law is, before Roe versus Wade, that this is a decision between a woman and her physician, and I am not going to do anything to change that. I'm Catholic, and I want to go back to something that Pope John Paul II said. And you know that the Catholic Church is very anti-abortion, and he said, where there are immoral laws in place already, our journey should be to support those that make the decision and gradually see a result that is more favorable towards us. And what I take out of that is that it is not our job to pitchfork and say, this should be illegal. And I could tell you something that may be controversial, but as a physician, I do not want to see abortion be illegal. It will increase the morbidity and mortality of women, and we do not need to go to back alley clinics and what it used to be. I can't support that. What I want to see is abortion be rare, but I think it is our job to make that the case. How do we make that the case? We fortify the foster care system. We make it easier to adopt a baby here than it is anywhere, including other countries. And we have to support women in crisis that are pregnant. These women are pregnant and afraid, and we need to be there to support them. And then it is a choice. And the choice, you will see that it will be less and less abortion. I don't believe personally that there are many people out there that are pro-abortion.
Correct. I agree.
I think that people want the choice, right? As any other freedom-seeking person.
Vaccines.
Right.
Yeah.
They want us to be adults and be able to make a choice about ourselves, and the government not to get into it. Well, I think that we can work on the other things that make it a choice and make abortion rare.
How do you stop Democrats from doing to you what they did to Tiffany Smiley on this issue? We've talked about it. You know, Tiffany Smiley said, I'm 100% pro-life. They snipped that little soundbite out and they put it on every ad they could and painted her as hating women and anti-women and too extreme for Washington. Right. So when you sit here and you talk about your personal position on abortion and how it is different from what you say you would support if you were the governor, and by the way, I think our viewers know that abortion access is not going to change in Washington state. Like, that's just not going to happen.
Right.
So I think it's a fear-mongering issue. But they will try to use your personal position to fear-monger voters away from supporting you. So how do you counter that in a way that's effective?
Well, I just said, I mean, as a physician, I do not want to see abortion be illegal.
Yeah.
I don't. It increases the morbidity and mortality of women, and this campaign will be very much about supporting women. We have hospitals in our state that have closed OBGYN, and they keep coming up. We are at a state in our state where our healthcare ranks 50th in availability of beds in the United States, right? So where do women get their healthcare if hospitals are going to keep closing OBGYN? So we're going to support that change, and we're going to support women. So they could attack me on my personal belief. That is my choice.
Yeah.
Right? Aren't we about choice? Don't we support choice? Well, that is my choice. Right? And I come to it on a scientific, just strictly scientific basis. So they could attack me, but it's just not true. And I will attack back, because that is not what I said.
Before we get to some of my concerns about the state of the Republican Party right now in Washington and whether they can stop fighting each other and, focus on winning elections, just because we were talking about healthcare availability, can you talk about the bill that the governor signed that you worked on?
Okay.
And we'll show folks the picture of you by the governor.
Yes. We work really hard at helping Toppenish Hospital keep its doors open. Toppenish Hospital was actually one of those hospitals that closed OBGYN. And OBGYN is a very hard service to keep. In the emergency department where I work, I have myself a physician, I have a couple of nurses. We could run the emergency department. For each birth, you need a pediatrician, an OBGYN, a nurse tech, respiratory tech. So it's a lot of expense for a hospital to run OBGYN if you're not a hospital that has a multitude of births a day, right? So in rural Washington, it is very tough to keep an OBGYN program. So we have to figure out solutions for that. And Toppenish was at a point where they were questioning keeping their doors open. So we went to Olympia, and we worked really hard. And I want to thank Paul Beren, who was one of our what can I think of the word? Lobbyists.
There you go. It's because nobody wants to think of a lobbyist.
I don't want to think of lobbyists. And Roman Daniels, who certainly helped us achieve this. But, I enjoyed sitting down with people like Senator Cleveland and Robinson and the other party and talking about something of the 80% that we agree on.
Yeah.
This is a hospital that is going to close, that provides care to the First Nation in Yakima and to the Toppenish community that is the majority Hispanic. And they have nowhere else to go. So we work really hard, and I'm very happy to say that both houses passed it unanimously, and Governor Inslee signed it this morning, and I was able to be there.
And you got a little Jay Inslee pen.
I did.
A souvenir to take home.
I did.
I love it. That's
absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
Maybe one day you'll have pens with your name on it.
Yes,
I expect one.
I got to say, I tried to write with it, and it doesn't write that good. So when I become governor, I'm going to make sure that the pens that everybody gets are much nicer.
And then I'll file the PDR for how much they cost, the taxpayer. Careful. Yes.
Okay.
Nothing too fancy.
Hey, we're going to be effective and efficient.
Yes,
okay,
good.
It will be cheaper, but they'll write better.
Okay, I love it.
Or how about that?
So I have said many times in the show that I think we are nearing the point where it is impossible for Republicans to win a statewide office in Washington. This sounds like a dumb question considering why you're here, but do you agree with that assessment?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I don't. And I have to go back to what I said earlier. When we keep putting candidates up that only represent the ideology of one party, the minority party is always going to lose. And my opponents are going to do that. Bob Ferguson is certainly going to represent the ideals of Democrats, and period, and he would feel that he only has to represent Democrats because that's the majority of the state. But we are going to bring out a campaign on issues. And I don't care if I'm sitting across from a libertarian or a Democrat or a Green Party member or even a communist. Right? Let's talk. Tell me why I should listen to you, and I'll tell you why you should listen to me. And we need to start having that dialogue. And when we do, people will say, this government works. This government represents us. And we may not agree on everything, but we will get rid of the disagreement that we have. Right now, we disagree and we're disagreeable about it. No, we're always going to I disagree with my wife.
I mean, she's usually right, but
yes,
so if you're
of course,
disagreeing with her, you're wrong.
Of course, she is.
Clearly, yes.
Not usually. She
Yeah,
is always right.
I know what that is.
Okay, I always say that men are black and white, and women give the world its color.
Sure.
Right.
Yes.
So she is always right, and I disagree with her, and we come together and we make decisions about our household. And our family disagrees. And we come together and we make decisions as a family. And our community may disagree. But we have to come together and make decisions as a community. And on to the state. And God, if we could do that and give the example to the rest of the country, that would be fabulous.
There is a divide amongst Republicans in our state. I mean, we saw it firsthand last week, and you got the mainstream Republican conference in Leavenworth, and then you got the Republican Action Conference an hour down the road. And it's like, oh, wow, even the divide for conferences. So you're going to be called a rhino by people on the far right who don't think that they don't think moderacy is a admirable attribute. Trust me, I know. I hear from them all the time on Twitter. Yeah. How does a candidate like you, who is saying, I'm trying to do this in a way where I'm reaching across the aisle during the campaign, how do you get that segment of the Republican Party on board with your campaign? Because you need the numbers.
Well, I don't care if they call me Rhino, as long as they call me winner.
As long as they still fill in the circle, right, sure.
Right, and winning is what we need to do to make a difference. 100% of nothing is nothing. So we could pitchfork all we want. And I was talking to a friend, and he said, Republicans always run on their chin, right? And I agree. We run on our convictions, and it has to be this way. How about running to what the community needs, right? And the issues may be different every year. When we get rid of the homeless, there will be other issues in the state of Washington. Mm-hmm. So my desire is to stay engaged, to do town hall meetings every week in all the counties, and come back to them and said, hey, 6 months ago I came here, you said you have these issues. This is what the state has done for that. And move to the other county and do that and remain engaged. Brandi, if we become the government that I would have the vision of building, our reelection will be a landslide. Because people will realize, wow, this kind of government can exist that represents everyone, even though we disagree. And I think that that's the message. And that's the message that I will give to our Republican Party. And that's the message that I will give to all the citizens of the state of Washington.